The afternoon we moved our mother into memory care, my sister called the family to the lake house to divide what was left. Renata didn't wait for our coats to come off. She shoved a folder down the table. Mom signed the entire trust to me. You get nothing. My father slapped the arm of his chair. She moved in, she ran the money, you ran off to the city. For 5 months Renata had run that money, and watched it run dry. She'd scratched my name off every page in the house, gouged deep enough to feel through the paper. Go on, she said, leaning in for the tears. Read what you lost. I closed the folder. I didn't argue, I didn't call a lawyer. Renata never asked what our mother had done last winter, the last clear-eyed thing she ever chose. She should have asked. I'm Sidney Whitmore, 32. My hand rested flat on that folder I would not open, and it stayed there. Why could I sit so still while my sister thought she'd won everything? For that, you go back to last January, the last time our mother's hands were steady. But stay in this room another minute first. It's worth it. Renata was already dabbing at a dry eye. Trent leaned back in Dad's good chair, arms folded, a landlord surveying his property. My father wouldn't look at me. He studied the grain of the table like it owed him an answer. Under the floor, the sump pump kicked on. It ground, that low, wet churn that had lived beneath this house for years, and nobody but me seemed to hear it. They read my quiet as surrender. That's the thing about a woman who doesn't shout. People decide she has nothing to say. She always was the cold one, Renata told the room, gentle as a knife. Not a word for her own mother. I let her have it, every syllable. Because I'd sat at 100 tables like this one, in another life, watching people argue over numbers they didn't understand. It's what I do for a living. And I already knew the one thing none of them had bothered to learn. The folder in front of me was thick with pages Renata had prepared. Signatures, amendments, a trust she'd bled herself to control. She'd fought for a house. She thought a house was the whole world. My mother had taught me otherwise. On a gray afternoon 6 months back, with snow coming down over the lake and her hands not yet betraying her, she'd pressed something into my palms and told me to keep it. I almost hadn't understood. Almost. Let me take you to that January, because everything in this room was decided there, and only 2 people in the family ever knew it. The drive out to the lake was 2 hours of white fields and salted road. I'd made it 100 times. This time my mother had called me herself, and her voice on the phone had been wrong, fast, low, like she was afraid of being overheard in her own house. She met me at the door before I knocked. Della Whitmore was 69, and that winter something in her had gone thin. Not her mind. Her mind was a blade. But her hands shook when they weren't busy, and she kept them busy now, gripping my sleeve, pulling me inside, past the kitchen, into the study where she wrote. Sit down, she said. No, don't sit, listen. On the desk sat a stack of cream-colored pages, edges soft with handling, corners darkened where a thumb had turned them 1,000 times. The original manuscript of her cookbook, her looping hand, page after page, some lines crossed out and rewritten in the margins, grease on the corners from a working kitchen. She put it in my arms like she was handing me a child. This is yours now, she said. Not the pretty copy on the shelf, this one. I started to thank her. She waved it off. Then she set a plain folder on top of it and pressed my hands down over both. Her grip was cold and certain. Mind the real things, Sidney. She held my eyes. The ones people can't see. I didn't know yet what she meant. I thought she was talking about memory, about love, about the way a family keeps score. Corinne has the rest, she said. You'll go to her, not now, when it's time. When what's time, Mom? She only looked at me. Outside, the snow kept falling on the frozen lake, and something in the house ticked and shifted, settling against the cold. You'll know, she said. Promise me you won't lose these. I promised. I didn't understand what I was promising. I know now. She wouldn't explain the folder that day, no matter how I circled back to it. Later, she kept saying, later. Pouring coffee, neither of us drank, moving around the study like the answers were something she could stay ahead of. My mother had never in her life been vague. She built things. She named them. And now she was talking around the center of every sentence. Somewhere below us, water dripped. She caught me listening. The sump pump, she said, and almost laughed. It's been dying for a year. Trent keeps promising to fix it. She shook her head. The house, always the house. That's the least of it, Sidney. Believe me. She'd built everything from nothing, my mother. A recipe box from her own mother's kitchen, then one cookbook, then a series people actually cooked from, splattered and dog-eared in a million homes. Then a company off the back of it, cookware, spice blends, meal kits with her name on the label. My father put his feet up and called himself an executive. She did the work. So when Della Whitmore told me the house was the least of it, I should have pressed harder. Instead, I took the manuscript and the folder to my car and drove home through the dark, both of them on the passenger seat where I could see them. She hugged me at the door, quick and fierce, like she was memorizing me. I felt the weight of something I couldn't yet read. I told myself it was the cold. People ask why I ran off to the city. The way my father says it, like a verdict. Here's the truth of it. I manage literary rights and royalties for a firm in Chicago. Authors' copyrights, licensing, the money that keeps flowing long after a book leaves the shelf. Boring work, invisible work. I track the things nobody photographs, which is exactly the daughter my mother needed, and exactly the daughter my family never counted. Renata was the one they counted. 4 years older, loud, lit from within. The kind of girl teachers remembered. She got the birthday parties. I got the practical gifts. At holidays, the story of Renata's latest triumph filled the table, and I learned to eat quietly and clear the plates. I told myself I preferred it. Mostly I believed me. So when my phone rang in February and it was Renata, warm as she'd been in years, I felt the old hope lift its head anyway. "You've been so stressed, Sid," she said. "Work, the drive, everything. Don't come up this month, I've got it handled." Handled, she said it twice. "I moved a few things in," she went on light. "Just to help Mom day to day. You focus on your life." I thanked her. I actually thanked her. What was she really doing up there, alone with our mother and the keys? I found out the way you find out about a slow leak. One wet spot at a time. By the end of February, there was a keypad on the lake house door. A black box bolted over the lock our family had used for 30 years. Renata's boxes crowded the front drive, then the mudroom, then the study. She'd just moved a few things in. She'd moved her whole life in. When I called the house, Renata answered. Every time. Mom was napping. Mom was tired. Mom was at physical therapy. I asked for the new door code so I could visit and let myself in like always. "Oh, don't bother with that," she said. "Just tell me when you're coming. I'll be here." I never got the code. I never once got Mom alone on the phone. I drove up unannounced one Sunday in March. The keypad blinked red. I stood on my mother's porch and knocked on my mother's door, and my sister opened it 6 inches on a chain. "You should have called," Renata said. Behind her, I could hear the television, and under it, faint, my mother's voice asking who was there. "It's Sidney, Mom," I called past my sister's shoulder. Renata's smile didn't move. "She's having a hard day," she said, and shut the door. 9 days later, my mother had a stroke. The call came from a nurse, not from my sister, that told me everything I needed to know. I drove the 2 hours and 90 minutes. A TIA, the doctor said, a small one. The first crack in a wall that would keep cracking. When I found the right floor, Renata was already installed in the hallway like she'd grown there, and she stepped into my path before I reached the room. "Family only right now," she said. "I'm family." "You'll upset her." She said it kindly, for the nurse's benefit, her voice pitched to carry. "She's fragile, Sidney. She needs calm, not people who show up once a season." A nurse looked up from her station. A woman in the waiting chairs looked up. My face went hot, and I kept it still. My father sat by the window in the room beyond, and through the open door he watched the whole thing and said nothing. Then, just loud enough, into the quiet, the way you drop a stone down a well. "You ran off to the city." He didn't even look at me when he said it. He said it to the glass. I stood in that corridor, 32 years old, and let two strangers decide I was the daughter who didn't care. I didn't get past my sister that day. But that night, near the end of visiting hours, a nurse I didn't know found me by the elevators. "She's asking for you," she said quietly. 2 minutes. I didn't tell your sister." The room was dim and full of machines. My mother's hand came off the blanket and found my wrist, and her grip, thinned as she was, closed hard. "The papers," she said. Her voice came in pieces. "You have them. The real ones." "I have them, Mom. They're safe. Not the house." Her eyes swam, then sharpened, one clear window opening in the fog. "The things they can't see. You keep them." "I will." She's going to try, my mother whispered. Let her. It won't matter. Promise. Then the fog rolled back over her, and she was asking about a train she needed to catch, a train that didn't exist, and the nurse touched my shoulder and I went. In the elevator, I stood very still. She'd known. In January, hands already unsteady, she had known this was coming. What had my mother done last winter that let her say it wouldn't matter? By April, my sister had a story and she was telling it everywhere. Sidney, the absent one. Sidney, who wouldn't lift a finger while Renata gave up everything to nurse their mother. She told it to the aunts, to the churchwomen, to Dad's old friends at the company. My father, who had watched me barred from a hospital hallway, repeated it like scripture. It's easier to believe the daughter who's in the room. I stopped defending myself. It's a losing game, arguing with a story people want to be true. Instead, one night at my kitchen table, I opened the folder my mother had given me in January. I do this for a living. I read instruments, assignments, transfers, licensing grants, the whole day long. And the language on these pages was not the language of a keepsake or a will. Assignment of rights, irrevocable, transfer of member interest, effective January. I read it twice, then a third time, standing up now, the coffee going cold. My mother's signature at the bottom, firm and full, dated the very afternoon I'd sat in her study. A second document under it, and my stomach went to the floor. I knew what I was looking at. I needed someone to tell me I was right. There was a name I recognized on the letterhead. Corinne Vance, her attorney. Corinne has the rest. I called her office first thing in the morning. Before I could reach her, my sister closed the last door. Doctor's orders, Renata told me on the phone. Flat now, the warmth long gone. No visits, it confuses her. You coming around sets her back for days. I'd like to hear that from her doctor. You'd like a lot of things. A pause, and then almost idle, the way you mention weather. Mom's getting her affairs in order anyway, while she still can. She's got a good lawyer helping her sort it all out. Something cold walked up my spine. Which lawyer? One I found for her. Somebody local. Corinne's getting old, Sid. Mom wanted fresh eyes. Corinne Vance had drawn up my mother's every legal breath for 20 years. My mother had told me, in January, Corinne has the rest. And now a new lawyer, a lawyer Renata found, was helping our mother sort it all out. When's the appointment? I asked, keeping my voice level. Don't, Renata said, just don't. The line went dead. I drove up the next morning without calling. I told myself I only wanted to see her face, to sit with her 1 hour. The lake road was clear now, spring coming in thin and gray over the water, and I made the turn into the drive and stopped. Renata's boxes were gone. So was Renata's car. So I would learn was Mom. The keypad on the door glowed red. I punched in the old code, the one from 30 years of family. Nothing. I tried the numbers I knew Renata used for everything. Nothing. She'd changed it. A neighbor came across the wet grass, an old friend of my mother's, hugging her cardigan against the chill. They left early, she said. Renata had your mom all dressed up, said they had papers to sign, something about getting things settled. She hesitated. Honey, your mother didn't look like she knew where she was going. I stood on my mother's porch, locked out of the house I grew up in, while my sister drove our confused, failing mother somewhere to sign her name. If you've ever been the one written out of the story, told you don't count, while someone louder rewrites the ending, you already know why I'm telling you this. Do me a favor before we go on. Take a second to like this video and subscribe so the channel can keep bringing you stories like Sidney's. And I'm curious where you're listening from. Drop your city and your local time in the comments. I read them. Now, back to that porch and the red light on the lock. I didn't pound on the door. I didn't chase the car. I stood there in the cold until my breath came even, and I made a decision. Not the one my family expected. I wasn't going to fight for the house. Let them have the house. The house, my mother had told me, was the least of it. I was going to find out what she'd actually done. What was in that folder? What Corinne has the rest meant? Why a dying woman had gripped my wrist and promised me it wouldn't matter. I got back in my car. I didn't drive home. I called Corinne Vance's office again, and this time I asked for the first appointment she had. Tell her it's Sidney Whitmore, I said. Della's daughter. She'll know why I'm coming. There was a pause on the line, and something in the assistant's voice changed. Ms. Vance has been expecting your call, she said, for some time. The afternoon light in Corinne Vance's office came through half-shut blinds, striping the desk between us. She didn't reach for papers right away. She poured me water and asked how my mother was, and I told her the truth, which was that I no longer knew. "You drove 2 hours to ask me one thing," she said, "but you haven't asked it." I hadn't. I'd rehearsed it in the car and left it there. "I don't want the house," I said. "I want to understand what she did." Corinne folded her hands. She was 58, silver at the temples, and she had a way of going still that made the room feel smaller. "Your mother came to me last January," she said. "Do you know what she said? The first thing, sitting where you're sitting?" "No." She said Renata would come for the wrong thing, and she wanted the right thing safe before her hands stopped working. The sentence sat there. I felt it in my chest before I understood it. "She planned for this," I said. "She planned for exactly this." I thought of January. The manuscript she'd pushed into my arms, her grip too tight. "Corinne has the rest." I'd carried those words around for 6 months like a stone in a coat pocket, never once turning them over. "Then show me," I said. "Whatever she left, I need to see it with my own eyes." Corinne stood, crossed to a locked cabinet, and drew out a folder thicker than I expected. She set it on the desk but kept her palm flat on top of it, the way you'd hold down a page in wind. "Before I open this," she said, "understand something. You've been grieving a house. You never had any reason to." She opened the folder and laid the pages out in a row, one after another, like she was dealing a hand she'd dealt many times before. "January 9th, she said. "Your mother, evaluated for capacity that morning by Dr. Priscilla Hearn. Lucid, documented, then she executed these." The first page was an assignment. I read the top of it in my professional voice, the one I used every day in Chicago, and then my professional voice failed me. The cookbook royalties, the literary rights to the Whitmore table, the whole backlist and the new licensing assigned out of the trust and into my name. $310,000 a year, Corinne said. "Rising, that's the current stream." To me. "To you, since January." The second page was heavier. The transfer of Della's controlling stake in Whitmore Table Company, 62%. I knew the company was valued near $4.8 million. I'd heard the number at holidays like weather. 62% was $3 million, and the board chair in control of everything Renata thought she was fighting for. "Also to me," I said. "Also to you. Also since January. Both instruments entirely outside the trust." She tapped the last page. "This is the trust. Read what's in it. One asset, the lake house. Mortgaged, drained, the sump pump grinding under a floor I'd been locked out of. That's all it holds," I said. "That's all it ever held after January." I looked at her signature on the assignment. Della Whitmore. Firm. The loops sure. The downstrokes pressed deep. The same hand that filled the manuscript sitting on my kitchen table 2 hours south. I understood then what the book had been. Not a keepsake. The source. The 310,000 had been living inside those grease-thumbed pages the whole time. "Mind the real things, Sidney, the ones people can't see." "She told me that," I said quietly. "In January. I thought it was comfort." Corinne gathered the pages back into their order. "The house was never the estate, Sidney," she said. "You are." I sat with that longer than I should have. Something loosened in my chest and something else pulled tight in its place, because a truth that big always drags a worse one behind it. "So I'm fine," I said. "The money's fine." Corinne didn't nod. That was the first thing I noticed, that she didn't nod. "The money is safe," she said. "Your mother is not." She laid it out the way she laid out everything, plainly. Della had been lucid in January. She was not lucid now. Since the March stroke, and the smaller ones that followed, she'd slid, and Renata had a new lawyer, not Corinne, someone Renata had found, steering a frail woman toward papers. "They'll come at the January transfers," Corinne said. "They'll argue she wasn't competent, that you influenced her." "That's their crime," I said, "not mine. People accuse loudest of what they're doing, you know that." I did. I'd watched it my whole life. "Then the fight isn't the house or the company," I said slowly. "It's her." "It's her." Corinne let the words settle. "Renata thinks she's winning a war over assets you already hold. Meanwhile, a sick woman is alone in a house with people who need her to keep signing things." The stripe of light had crawled off the desk while we talked. My mother was 2 hours away. behind a keypad I didn't know, and the only version of this where I lost was the version where I chased money I already had and left her in that room. What do? I said. Legally, cleanly, no tricks. There are channels, Corinne said. We use them properly in daylight or we don't use them. No recordings, I said. No cameras, nothing I'd be ashamed to read aloud. Corinne almost smiled. You are very much her daughter. I gathered my coat. At the door I stopped. She knew Renata would take the wrong thing, I said. She didn't know Renata would take her. Neither did I. That was the part I couldn't yet hold. Driving home, I did the arithmetic no one else in my family had bothered to do. Renata thought the lake house was the prize. 740,000 on the appraisal, a number she loved to say at dinner. But I managed intangible value for a living. I knew how to read what was hiding behind a big round figure. The cash-out refinance was 620,000, borrowed against the house to fund the company's expansion, and Mom's medical bills. Renata's own HELOC draw, 85,000. Back property taxes creeping past 31,000. Sell it, pay the costs, and the equity landed somewhere near zero, maybe under. She was scratching my name off a money pit, and she didn't know it. That was the shape of the whole thing, and I turned it over the rest of the drive. I held every real card. Renata held a stack of debt with a lake view. She was playing a hand she couldn't see, and I could see both hands, and the temptation to tell her, to say one clean sentence and watch her face, sat in me like heat. I didn't call her. Restraint isn't patience. Patience assumes it costs you nothing to wait. It cost me plenty. Every day I stayed quiet was a day Renata felt certain, and a certain Renata kept Mom compliant and calm. And a calm house was the only house where Mom stayed reachable. The moment I tipped my hand, she'd bunker down and my mother would disappear behind her. So I did the slow, unsatisfying, correct thing. I called Corinne back and we opened an inquiry through Adult Protective Services, the real way, with dates and names and the medical record. We documented the isolation, the changed keypad, the intercepted calls, the doctor's orders that no doctor had written. We built a file that could stand in a room full of strangers. No secret tapes, no gotcha, just a true account, assembled in order, waiting. I told Corinne one more thing before I hung up. Don't let anything move fast, I said. Fast is how she wins. What I didn't say was that Renata was already moving. I just didn't know where yet. I found out 3 days later, secondhand, the way I found out everything now. Trent called. Not me. Renata, on speaker, in a kitchen that echoed, and my cousin heard it and told me because she thought I should know. Trent didn't lower his voice. He never had. He was a man who'd failed at 4 businesses and blamed the market each time. And he talked about my mother's house like it was the 5th one, the one that would finally work. We list it, we clear a fortune, he said. That house is the whole ball game. Renata, somewhere near him, said the appraisal number out loud like a prayer. Then lock it down, Trent said. Get her name on everything before Sidney gets ideas. Do it now while she's soft. While she's soft. About my mother. The woman who'd built the thing keeping his lights on. My cousin said the sump pump had been running the whole call, that grinding whine under the floor, and Renata had shouted over it about the valuable house, never once hearing that the house was telling on itself. Water coming up through the basement, money going down through the same hole. I sat in my apartment with the manuscript on the table in front of me, Della's looping hand on the cover, and I felt the old wound open, the invisible daughter, the one who did the quiet work while the loud ones divided the credit. Trent thought he was 1 meeting away from a fortune. He was 1 meeting away from a bill. I didn't gloat, even alone. Gloating is for people who aren't sure they've won, and I was sure. What I felt instead was colder and more useful. They were in a hurry, and hurry with a frail woman meant only one thing. They were going to make her sign something. I called Corinne. They're accelerating, I said. Whatever we petition for, it needs to be ready before they get her to a table. How do you know? Corinne asked. Because Trent said while she's soft. The line went quiet. We'll be ready, Corinne said. But ready and in time are not the same thing, and we both knew it. The afternoon Trent Cade drove to Chicago. He didn't call ahead. He was waiting in my office lobby when I came down for lunch, standing by the security desk in a blazer that had cost money he no longer had, smiling like we were friends who'd lost touch. Sidney, he said, you look well. We'd never once been alone in a room. 9 years married to my sister. And Trent had never had a reason to speak to me directly because I'd never had anything he wanted. He did now. Trent, I said, you drove 2 hours. I was in the area. He wasn't. Nobody is in the area of my building unless they came for it. I signed him in as a visitor because the alternative was a scene in front of my colleagues, and I walked him to the little glass conference room off the lobby where we vet contracts we don't trust. He started warm. That was the part I'd expected. He talked about Renata being stressed, about the family tearing itself up over nothing, about how the two of us were the reasonable ones who could fix this in an afternoon. He kept landing on that one word, reasonable. Desperate men love it. There's a waiver, he said finally. You've seen it. I've seen it. Just sign it, Sidney. Make it easy. Everybody moves on. I didn't answer. I've learned that silence does more work than any sentence, and I let it do the work while he leaned back and studied me for a crack. He found none, so he changed his face. You should know how it looks, he said. The daughter who vanished. Now she's got a lawyer, sniffing around a dying woman's money. He tilted his head. That's a story, Sidney. Renata tells it well. She does. A restraining order isn't hard to get. Not against someone who trespassed. Facility's already got you flagged. He spread his hands. Sorry, so sorry. I'm trying to help you avoid that. You drove 2 hours to help me. Something in him slipped then. The blazer, the smile, the sorry. It all thinned, and underneath was a man doing math at 3 a.m. He put his forearms on the table and dropped his voice like we were co-conspirators. You don't get it. We're underwater. Both mortgages, the HELOC, the school bills. He said each debt fast, the way you confess when you've held it too long. I co-sign things. The house clears it. The house has to clear it. There it was, not a threat, a ledger. How deep, I said. Deep enough. He caught himself too late. It doesn't matter. Point is that money's coming, and you signing a piece of paper is the only thing standing between my kids and a very bad year. He believed it. That was the thing I sat with. He genuinely believed the lake house was a fortune with his name almost on it, and he'd built a whole life on the far side of a number he'd never checked. I manage intangible value for a living. I know exactly what it looks like when a man mortgages his future against an asset he hasn't read. I could have told him, one sentence, the REFI, the HELOC, the taxes, the zero at the bottom. I could have watched the fortune drain out of his face right there in the glass room. The temptation sat in me like heat, same as always. I didn't. I'll consider the waiver, I said. Not yes, not no, the words that keep a desperate man hoping and a hoping man quiet. Relief moved across him so fast it was almost pity. He stood, buttoned the expensive blazer, shook my hand with both of his. You're the reasonable one, he said. I always said that. He hadn't. He'd never said anything about me at all. I walked him back to the lobby. At the doors he stopped, and the co-conspirator face came back on, and he said the thing he'd driven 2 hours to be able to say to my face. Don't make Renata come at you, he said quietly. You won't like her when she's cornered. Sign the paper. Stay the reasonable one. Then he pushed out into the street and was gone. I went back up to my desk and didn't eat. What stayed with me wasn't the threat. It was the arithmetic behind his eyes, the specific fear of a man who'd already spent the money in his head and needed my signature to make it real. He told me how deep the debt ran. He told me they had no floor left to hit, and a man with no floor doesn't wait patiently for a court date. He finds a faster way down, and he takes whoever's nearest with him. I didn't yet know how fast. The next morning my phone lit with a text from Renata, the first she'd sent in 6 weeks. Hi, hun. I know things have been tense. Family should stick together. Come up Sunday. We'll clear the air, sign a few things so everyone knows where they stand and put this behind us. Mom would want peace. Love you. Love you. She hadn't said that to me since we were girls, and she meant it now about as much as she had then. Sign a few things so everyone knows where they stand. There it was, dressed up as a hug. A waiver. She wanted me at a table, softened by the word family, putting my name on a page that gave up claims I hadn't even told her I had. I read it 4 times. Then I set the phone down and looked at my mother's handwriting on the manuscript and did the thing that cost me the most, which was nothing. I typed 1 line back. Let me check my schedule. Not no. No would spook her. Maybe kept her calm, and calm kept Mom reachable a little longer. She replied in seconds. A heart, a thumbs up, a so glad, hon. The whole warm performance of a woman who believed she was 3 signatures from everything. She thought I was the one being managed. The stolen visit came through June Ashby, a nurse who'd known my mother before any of this, who'd read the Whitmore table in her own kitchen years ago. She didn't break a rule. She told me an appointment window, a lull, a side door, and she stood nearby the whole time so no one could say a thing. Mom was in the sunroom, smaller than March. Her hands moved on the blanket like they were still cooking, still doing the work they'd always done, and her eyes went past me twice before they found me. I sat close and took one of those moving hands. It's Sidney, Mom. Nothing. Then a small pull at the corner of her mouth, not quite my name. I didn't fill the silence. I'd learned that from her. We sat, and the light did what light does, and I let myself, for 1 minute, not be strong. I found the papers, I whispered. I understand now. Her hand tightened on mine, the same too-tight grip from January, weaker but there. And her eyes cleared, just for a breath, the way a window clears when you wipe one small circle in the fog. The real things, she said, then softer, half of it lost. The ones people can't see. That was all. The circle fogged over. Her eyes drifted to the window and she asked June, politely, who the young woman was. I held it together until the car, then I didn't. She was still in there. That was the cruelty of it. Not that she was gone, but that she wasn't. That she surfaced just long enough to hand me the one sentence that mattered, and then sank back under. She'd chosen me while she still could. And I was going to make it count while she still could be reached. I wiped my face and started the engine. Somewhere in that house a keypad clicked. I didn't yet know Renata had already learned I'd been there. She'd learned within the hour. Someone at the facility mentioned a visitor, and Renata did what Renata did with anything she couldn't control. She set it on fire. The letter came from her, not the lawyer, so the rage was undiluted. I had trespassed. I had upset a fragile woman. I was banned from any contact, and if I came near the family again, she would seek a restraining order and let everyone know exactly the kind of person I was. Then she did the second thing, the public thing, which she was better at than anyone I'd ever met. The story went out ahead of the truth, the way her stories always did. Sidney the absentee. Sidney who ran off to the city and left her dying mother to Renata's exhausted, saintly hands. She told it to the aunts. She told it at church. She told it to the long-timers at Whitmore Table Company, the people who'd known me since I was a kid. And she told it well, because she believed the part where she was the martyr. Calls came. A cousin, careful. An aunt, cold. How could you? After everything Renata's done. The one time your mother needs you. I answered none of it with the truth. The truth was in a folder in Corinne's cabinet, and it would come out in one room, once, in daylight, not leaked into a phone tree to win a week. That was the hardest week. Being called the abandoner by people who'd never once watched me do the quiet work. The wound I'd carried my whole life, handed back to me with my sister's fingerprints on it. I let them think it. Every voice that called me heartless was a voice telling Renata she was winning, and a winning Renata stayed loud and careless. Careless people leave things where you can find them. The next call I got wasn't family. It was Hollis Brandt, and Hollis didn't do gossip. Sidney, he said, your father was just in my office. We need to talk about the company. Hollis Brandt was 55, Della's chief operating officer for 11 years, and the kind of man who read a contract before he shook a hand. He'd loved my mother without ever once saying so. Gordon came in this morning, he said. Renata was on the phone the whole time in his ear. What did they want? A distribution, an advance against the estate. I could hear him choosing words. 90-some thousand up front, more to follow. Gordon said the family needed liquidity while things settled. They were reaching into the company now, reaching for a distribution from a company they believed my mother still controlled, on behalf of a house they believed was theirs, blind, completely blind, that the controlling stake had left Della's hands in January and landed in mine. What did you tell him? I said. That distributions require board approval, That the chair seat is a matter of record, and I wasn't comfortable moving anyone's money until the record was clear. A pause. He got loud. Said his advisory salary depended on this. 90 a year, Sidney. He talked like it was owed to him. It was, in a sense. My father's 90,000 a year sinecure. The paycheck for a man who'd built nothing, coasting on a company my mother made. And every dollar of it now ran through a stake that belonged to me. You stalled him, I said. I stalled him. But I need to know what I'm standing on. Gordon says the estate. Renata says the trust. I've worked for your mother long enough to know she doesn't leave things to chance. His voice dropped. So I'll ask you plainly, who holds her shares? The irony of it nearly made me laugh. Gordon in Hollis's office demanding money from a company I controlled, never guessing the person on the other end of Hollis's next call. Come see Corinne Vance with me, I said. Bring nothing. I'll show you exactly what you're standing on. That's what I hoped you'd say, Hollis said. Because Gordon's coming back Friday, and he's bringing that new lawyer of Renata's. We met at Corinne's the next day. Hollis read the transfer twice, and I watched an 11-year weight come off his shoulders and something harder replace it. January 9th, he said. It's recorded, filed with the company. It's clean. It's clean, Corinne said. He looked at me. Then you're the majority owner. You're the board chair the moment you claim the seat. Gordon can bring 10 lawyers Friday. He's asking me to hand out money that's yours to hand out. There it was, sitting on the table between us. The seat, the control, the power to end my father's paycheck with a signature and freeze every dollar Renata was banking on. One phone call, one filing. I could walk into that company Friday, and there would be nothing loud enough in the world for Renata to say. I told Hollis to keep stalling. He blinked. You could end this Friday. I could end the company fight Friday, I said. And the second I do, Renata knows I have the shares. And a Renata who knows I have the shares is a Renata who bunkers down with my mother and stops letting anyone near her. Hollis was quiet a moment. You're protecting Della first. Everything else can wait, she can't. So I stall, he said slowly. I stall, and I let Gordon think he might win. And I let Renata think she already has. You let them think whatever keeps that house calm, I said. The day I claim the seat is the day everyone finds out at once in one room with her cared for. Hollis stood, buttoned his coat, and looked at me the way people looked at my mother. She trained you, he said, didn't she? She trusted me, I said. It's not the same thing, and it's better. He left to go stall my father. I stayed holding a power I refused to spend, and it should have felt like strength. It didn't yet. It felt like waiting for a wave you could already see building out past the buoys. 2 days later, the wave came in an envelope. The letterhead belonged to Renata's new lawyer. The language belonged to people who suspected something was wrong and couldn't name it. I was to waive any and all claims against the estate. I was to return any property or documents removed from the family home. I was to respond within 10 days or face appropriate action. They didn't know. That was the whole tell. You don't demand someone return any documents when you know exactly which documents exist and where they live. You cast a net that wide only when you feel a shape in the dark and can't see it. Renata had felt something. My calm, my quiet, the visit, Hollis's stalling. And she'd sent a fishing letter dressed as a threat. Return any property or documents. My mother's handwritten manuscript sat on my table as I read it. The one thing they'd told me to hand back was the one thing that proved everything, and they didn't even know to ask for it by name. I set the letter beside the manuscript. Della's looping hand on the cover, grease-thumbed at the corners from 40 years of kitchens, 310,000 a year living in those pages. They wanted it in an envelope, unnamed, returned. I photographed nothing. I recorded nothing. I called Corinne and read her the letter word for word. They're guessing, she said. They're guessing, I agreed. How do we answer? We don't wave, and we don't fish back. A pause, and I heard her decide. We stop responding to them. It's time we started making them respond to us. We filed on a Tuesday. Corinne submitted the completed Adult Protective Services report. The isolation, the intercepted calls, the medical record, the pattern, assembled in daylight, every claim sourced. And alongside it, she petitioned the court to appoint a neutral conservator for my mother. Not me. A stranger, court-supervised, whose only job would be to protect a woman who could no longer protect herself and to make sure no one got her alone at a table again. No accusation I couldn't back, no tape, no trick, no leaked story. Just the true account, filed where it counted, in front of a judge instead of a phone tree. Renata was served 2 days later. I wasn't there, but I heard. She'd opened it at the lake house and gone white, then red, and called 3 people in an hour, and the word she kept using was betrayal. Mine, of course, never hers. A neutral conservator meant she couldn't be the only door to Mom anymore. It meant a court would look. It meant the fishing letter hadn't scared me off, and the abandoner story hadn't buried me. And for the first time in 6 months, Renata was answering a move instead of making one. She'd spent the spring certain she held all the leverage. Now a stranger in a robe was going to ask her questions. I felt no triumph. What I felt was the clock. Because I knew my sister, and I knew what a cornered Renata did. She didn't retreat. She escalated faster and harder to get out ahead of the thing closing on her. The call from June Ashby came that Thursday, low and quick. "Sidney," she said, "they're moving your mother, today. Renata's calling it memory care." By the time I reached the facility, the intake was half done. I stood in a corridor that smelled of disinfectant and someone else's flowers, and watched through a doorway as they settled my mother into a room that wasn't hers. Renata had chosen it fast. Too fast. A place with a wait list she'd somehow jumped. For her safety, she said to a nurse, loud enough for the hall. For her safety. 2 days after a conservator petition asked a court to check who was keeping Della alone. Mom sat on the edge of a strange bed in her good coat, the one she wore to church, buttoned wrong. She held her purse in her lap with both hands like she was waiting for a bus. She kept asking whether the oven was off at home. Nobody answered her. A staffer moved to close the door, and I stepped back before Renata could see me. This wasn't the room to be found in, not yet. But I looked once, all the way across, and my mother looked up at the exact wrong moment, and our eyes met through the closing gap. For half a second the fog cleared. She saw me, her mouth opened, the door shut. I stood in that corridor a long time. Memory care, Renata called it. What it was a wall. A place with sign-in sheets and restricted hours, where a court investigator would need permissions, where a nurse like June could be scheduled off my mother's floor. Renata had just built the thickest wall she could find and put my mother behind it, and she'd done it wearing the face of a daughter who cared. She was clearing the room, and I understood, standing there, why she needed my mother that isolated, that fast. She had one more paper to get signed, and within the week she got it signed. Renata told me herself, because telling me was the point. She called, and for once she didn't perform warmth. She'd stopped needing to. "It's done," she said. "What's done?" "The trust." I could hear her smiling. Mom signed the amendment. Sole beneficiary. Me. All of it. The house, the company, the royalties, everything she built, mine. She thought she'd named herself heir to everything. She'd named herself heir to one mortgaged house with no equity left in it, a trust that had been an empty shell since January, and she said it like she'd won my whole life in a single sentence. "She chose me, Sidney." The knife slid in slow. "Not you, me, it's legal, it's signed, there's nothing you can do." I stood very still in my kitchen with the manuscript in front of me, and my mother's firm January signature living inside it, and I thought about the signature Renata had just gotten. A woman in a strange room, coat buttoned wrong, asking if the oven was off. "You had her sign it," I said, not a question. "I had her do the right thing." A beat. "Don't come to the reading. There's nothing in it for you. You get nothing." She'd said it in different words before, and she'd say it in those exact words again, at a table in July, shoving a folder down its length. She didn't know she was rehearsing her own ruin. "Congratulations," I said, and meant it more than she could possibly understand, and hung up. She'd signed a sick woman's name onto an empty box and called it winning. And she was going to spend the summer certain, right up until the moment a lawyer opened a folder. The amendment arrived by mail a week later. Renata sent me a copy on purpose, the final twist of the blade, proof in my hands that I'd lost. I read the legal language first, out of habit. Then I saw the signature at the bottom, and everything legal in me went quiet, and everything that was her daughter came up my throat. Della Whitmore, but not the name I knew. Not the sure loops from January, not the pressed downstrokes on the manuscript cover. This one was thin, crooked. It wandered off the line and came back, faltered on the second L, and someone's steadier pressure showed in how it started and where it stopped. A hand that was held. A hand that was coaxed. I laid it beside a photocopy of the January assignment. 2 signatures, months apart. One a woman deciding, one a woman being decided for. It wasn't the money. I'd stopped caring about the money in Corinne's office in January's shadow. It was that they'd taken her hand. The hand that wrote the book that fed all of us. The hand that gripped mine too tight in the sunroom and moved it across a page while she asked about an oven in a house she'd never see again. Mind the real things, Sidney, the ones people can't see. I finally understood the whole of it. The real thing was never the shares or the royalties or the house. It was her. It had always been her, the person underneath everything they were carving up, and I was the only one at that table who'd come for her instead of for a number. Something in me went from grief to iron. I wasn't going to fight Renata for assets. I already had the assets. I was going to make one room, on the first Tuesday of July, look straight at what had been done to my mother, with a lawyer, a colleague, a doctor's evaluation, and the truth in order. And I was going to let it speak once, all the way through. Renata thought the story was over. She thought she'd won everything. She never asked what our mother had done last winter. So, what do you think happens when that lawyer finally opens her folder and my sister finds out what she really signed? Guess before I show you. I promise it's worse than she can imagine, and better than you're hoping. The afternoon light was gone from Corinne's office by the time we got to the hearing. She spread 3 folders across the table and tapped the thinnest one. This is the whole case, she said. One doctor, one winter afternoon. Dr. Priscilla Hearn had sat with my mother last January. She'd asked her the date, the season, the name of her own company. She'd asked her to explain, in her own words, what she was giving away and why. Mom had answered every question. Hearn wrote it down, signed it, dated it. A capacity evaluation isn't a formality, Corinne said. It's a photograph. It fixes a person in time. I understood the shape of it then. The January evaluation didn't only protect what Mom gave me. It did something crueler to Renata than any accusation. Put it beside the amendment. The thin, coaxed signature, the memory care intake, the vascular decline charted stroke by stroke, and the contrast spoke for itself. Lucid in January, not lucid now. The same document, I said, proves my mother meant it and proves your sister's amendment can't hold. Yes. Corinne closed the folder. Della didn't just plan, she left a witness. I thought of the manuscript on my shelf, the papers tucked in its spine, and how quiet all of it had been. No noise, no fight, just a woman writing down what she wanted while her hands were still steady enough to write. Corinne slid the folder into her bag. The hearing is set. We're ready. I should have known ready is the word that invites the storm. Because the next morning, Renata's lawyer filed something none of us expected. The letter came from a firm I didn't recognize. 3 names on the letterhead, all of them expensive. Corinne read it twice before she handed it across the desk. Her face didn't change, which was how I knew it was bad. They weren't defending the May Amendment anymore. They'd stopped pretending it mattered. They had a new theory now, and it turned the whole thing inside out. They claimed my mother had been incompetent in January. Not May. January. The exact month Dr. Hearn had certified her sharp. They argued the evaluation was wrong or coached or bought. And they argued that the person who'd coached it, who'd stood over a confused old woman and walked away with a company, was me. I read the word twice. Undue influence, my name in the same sentence. They're accusing me, I said, of doing exactly what Renata did. Yes. Corinne set down her pen. It's the oldest move there is. You accuse the other side of your own crime, loudly first. I sat very still. For 6 months I'd built my calm on one belief. That the January papers were solid ground, the one thing no one could touch. Now they were reaching for the ground itself. If a judge believed Mom was already gone in January, then the assignment failed, the transfer failed, Everything Mom chose while she could still choose would dissolve, and I'd be the villain who'd emptied her hands. Can they win that? I asked. They can make it a fight. Corinne looked at me carefully. Which is what they want. A long, ugly fight is expensive. They're betting you'll settle to make it stop. I looked at the folders, the photograph in time. Suddenly it felt less like a shield. Then I need to understand who's actually driving this, I said. Because there was one person in that family who'd never wanted a fight in his life. And I thought, if I could reach him alone, I might learn what they were really afraid of. I called my father and asked him to meet me. Just us, no Renata. He chose a diner off the county road, the kind of place my mother used to say had honest coffee and nothing else. He was already in the booth when I got there, hands around a mug, and he looked older than the last time, smaller inside his coat. Sidney, he said, not unkind, just tired. I sat across from him. For a moment neither of us said anything. She's not going to know either of us soon, he said finally. You understand that? Your mother. Some mornings she calls me by her brother's name. His voice caught. It was the first true thing he'd said to me in years, and I let it sit there because it was real and because I could see what it cost him. Gordon had built nothing. 50 years married to a woman who built everything, and he'd stood in the warmth of it and called it his. Now the warmth was going out, one name at a time, and he was frightened. I'm sorry, Dad, I said, and I meant it. He nodded, then his jaw set and the softness went out of him. Take the settlement, he said. Whatever Renata offers, take it and go back to your life. Dad, you ran off to the city. He said it flat, an old verdict. You made your choice a long time ago. Let your sister have this one. There it was. Comfort. The 90,000 a year that let him keep his dignity, the daughter who counted. He wasn't cruel. He was afraid of a world where he had to answer for anything. She earned it, he added, quieter. She stayed. I looked at my father, grieving my mother and choosing the wrong daughter in the same breath. I'm not here to fight you, I said and stood. What I didn't say was that I already knew how frightened they truly were. And 2 days later, a nurse would tell me exactly how frightened and how fast they were moving. June Ashby caught me in the memory care parking lot, still in her scrubs, a cigarette she wasn't smoking between 2 fingers. You didn't hear this from me, she said. I waited. Your sister's been on her phone in the family room, loud. June glanced at the doors. Contractors, a window company, somebody about a listing consult next month. A listing consult, I repeated. For the lake house. She dropped the cigarette, stepped on it. Her husband keeps saying, once this clears, like it's already theirs. I felt the cold of it settle. They weren't waiting for the hearing. They weren't waiting for Mom. They were spending against the house right now. New windows, a stager, a realtor circling. Pre-selling a thing they didn't own to cover debts a court was about to expose. They think they've won, I said. They act like it, June hesitated. Your mama asked for you Tuesday, just for a second. Then it was gone. The lot went quiet around that. Thank you, I said, for both things. She nodded and went back inside. I stood there a while longer, watching the lit windows, and did the arithmetic I'd been avoiding. Every dollar Renata borrowed against that house was a dollar she'd owe when the numbers came out. She was digging, fast, and calling it victory. The court's investigator was a woman named Marlene Osteen, and she came without an agenda I could read, which is exactly what a neutral investigator is supposed to be. She'd been appointed to look into the conservator petition. Her job was simple and enormous. Interview the family, review the record, and tell a judge who my mother actually needed protecting from. She met each of us separately. No lawyers in the room, just her, a legal pad, and questions she'd clearly asked 100 families before mine. Renata went first. She told me about it afterward, gloating, sure she'd charmed her way through. I heard the rest from the file later, and from Corinne and from the shape of what came next. Renata had performed. Of course she had. She was good in a room. She'd built a whole spring on being good in a room. She'd have worn the exhausted caregiver face, the one that said I gave up everything for her. She'd have talked about the meals, the medications, the sleepless nights, the sister who ran off to the city and left it all on her. Marlene Osteen wrote it down. She wrote everything down. That was her whole method. She let you talk, and she noted the parts you didn't know you were giving away. My turn came on a Wednesday, in a borrowed office downtown. She didn't perform warmth, and she didn't perform suspicion. She poured me water, the way Corinne had, and she asked me to just tell her what happened, in order. So I did. No theatrics. No adjectives I couldn't defend. I gave her dates. The February move-in. The March stroke. The keypad that changed in April. The new code no one gave me. The calls that stopped connecting. The doctor's orders barring me that no doctor had signed. The new lawyer, not our mother's lawyer of 20 years, a different one found by Renata. The memory care move executed in a single afternoon, 2 days after a court was asked to look at who kept my mother alone. I didn't tell her what I held. That wasn't her question, and I'd promised Corinne I'd bring nothing to any room I'd be ashamed to read aloud. "You're not seeking the conservatorship for yourself," she said. "Why not?" "Because a stranger can't be accused of wanting her money," I said. "I can. A neutral one protects her cleaner than I could." She wrote that down too, and something in her pen slowed. Then she went back to Renata. That's the part I only understood later, how she circled. She'd taken Renata's saintly version, and she'd taken my documented one, and she'd held them side by side, and somewhere in the overlap she found the seam. She called Renata back in for one more question, just one. I wasn't there. I've imagined it more times than I'll admit. She asked Renata who chose the new lawyer. That was all. Not an accusation. A clerk's question, flat as a form. Who chose the lawyer who steered your frail mother toward new papers, the one who wasn't the attorney she'd trusted for 20 years? Renata, my sister, who could talk her way through anything, did not have a clean answer. Because there wasn't one. The honest answer was, I did, and I found him, and I brought him to her, and any way she dressed it landed in the same place. She said something about Mom being confused and wanting fresh eyes. Marlene Austin wrote it down. Then she asked the second half, still flat, still kind. "And the locks," she said, "who changed those and when?" The file notes, when I finally saw them, recorded that Mrs. Whitmore Cade became agitated at this point in the interview. 2 small questions, and the caregiver mask slipped just far enough for a court's investigator to see the shape of what was under it. Renata called me that night, and for the first time in the whole long spring, she wasn't gloating. "What did you tell her?" she demanded. "The truth," I said, "in order, nothing else." "You've turned this into something," her voice climbed. "You've made me look like—" She stopped. She couldn't finish it, because finishing it meant naming what she looked like, and she wasn't ready to hear herself say it out loud. "Marlene Osteen asked you 2 questions," I said. "I didn't write them." I hung up. A neutral stranger with a legal pad had done in one afternoon what 6 months of my silence had been protecting. She'd asked the plain questions, and the plain answers had a direction, and the direction pointed away from my mother's saintly caregiver and straight at a locked door. The report wasn't finished, but it was moving now, and it was moving toward a table in July, and Renata could feel it under her feet the way you feel water rising in a basement you swore was dry. And I understood, finally, that I had a choice about how this ended. I could fight them the way they were fighting me, or I could do something they'd never see coming. I went home and sat with it all night. The easy road was the ugly one. Fire back at their scorched earth filing, subpoena Trent's failed ventures, drag their debts into the light one humiliating page at a time. I had the ammunition. I could bury them. But I kept hearing my mother. "Mind the real things, Sidney. The ones people can't see." She hadn't hidden the truth. She'd written it down plainly and trusted it to hold. A fight in the shadows would only prove their story, that this family conspired in back rooms over a helpless woman. I wanted the opposite of shadows. So I decided to bring everything into one room, not a courtroom, not a war of letters. One table, one afternoon, with witnesses who couldn't be waved away. Corinne, with the documents. Hollis Brandt from the company, who'd confirmed the share transfer was recorded and the board chair already filled. Dr. Hearn's January evaluation, in a folder anyone could open. Let them say it all first. Let Renata slide her papers down the table and tell me I'd lost. And then let the truth be read aloud in daylight by people who had no reason to lie. I called Corinne in the morning. "No motions," I said. "No countersuit, one meeting, everyone in the room." She was quiet a moment. "You're sure that's a risk? You give them the first word." "I want them to take it," I said. "I want it on the record who said what before anyone knew." "When?" "The first Tuesday of July." Mom's meeting month. Renata had already called the family to the lake house to divide what was left. I'd simply be there when she did. Then we prepare, Corinne said, for a room. I set the phone down. Everything I needed was already true. I only had to survive the day before it. The day before, everything I'd built nearly came apart in a hallway. I'd gone to say goodbye to Mom, or to try. June had smuggled me a 15-minute window while Renata was out. Mom was sitting by the window with the light on her face, and for a moment she looked like herself, and my chest ached with hope. "Mom," I said softly and took her hand. She turned to me, her eyes moved over my face, searching, patient, the way you look at a stranger who seems to expect something. "You're one of the girls from the kitchen," she said kindly. "Are the pies out?" "It's Sidney," I said, "your daughter." "That's nice," she said, and looked back at the window. I didn't cry. I sat with her hand in mine and let the minutes pass. On my way out, I heard them in the family room. Renata, Trent, my father, voices low and easy. Renata was saying, "Once Sidney signs off, we split the proceeds 3 ways and Dad's taken care of." Dividing me out. Not even angry anymore, just done with me. The old wound opened without a sound. "You were never seen. You did the quiet work and no one ever looked up. Even here, at the end, even holding her hand, you were a girl from the kitchen." I made it to my car before I stopped moving. I sat in the lot with the keys in my lap and thought very clearly that I could let them have it, all of it, just to stop hurting. That night I couldn't sleep, so I took the manuscript down from the shelf. Cream pages, my mother's looping hand, the corners still dark where she'd thumbed them with buttered fingers. I'd read it 100 times as a girl. I hadn't really read the letter she'd tucked inside it since January. I read it now. She'd written it the same afternoon she signed everything. Her hand was steady then. The words were plain. "Sidney," she wrote, "you never made noise. You did the work that doesn't show. The rights, the numbers, the things people forget are real until they're gone. Renata was easy to love loudly. You were the one I trusted with what I couldn't see." And then, near the bottom, "Mind the real things. The ones people can't see. That's you. It was always you." I read it 3 times. She had seen me. All those years I'd counted myself invisible. She'd been watching, and when her hands were still steady enough to choose, she chose me, not out of anger at Renata, but because she knew who kept the real things safe. The choice wasn't the reward. The choice was the proof. A girl from the kitchen doesn't get handed a company. A daughter does. The one you see. I folded the letter back into the pages. I wasn't going to that lake house to win. I was going because my mother, in the last clear-eyed hour of her life, had asked me to mind the real things. And I intended to. I called Corinne at 7 the next morning and told her we were on. Corinne walked me through it one last time, item by item, the way you check a rope before you trust your weight to it. "The January evaluation is admissible," she said. "Dr. Hearn stands behind it. The assignment of the royalty stream, $310,000 a year, is notarized and recorded. The transfer of 62% of Whitmore Table Company is filed with the company and the state." "And Hollis?" "Hollis will be there. He confirms the transfer went on the books in January, and the board chair is yours the moment you claim it." She looked up. "The APS findings support undue influence in the spring, not January. The picture is consistent. Della was sound when she chose you and impaired when your sister moved her. Everything in order, every real thing accounted for." The dramatic irony of it sat in my stomach like a stone. Tomorrow, today, now, Renata would walk into that house believing she owned all of it. The cookbook, the company, the house. She'd spent money against it. She'd rehearsed her victory. She had no idea she'd inherited an empty shell with a mortgage in the basement. "She's going to say terrible things," I said. "Let her." Corinne gathered the folders. "The more she says before I open this, the clearer the record. You don't have to answer any of it, the documents will." "I know. One more thing." She paused at the door. "When it turns, and it will turn fast, don't gloat. You won't need to. Let it be quiet. Villain explodes, narrator stays calm." "I understand," I said. I drove to the lake house that afternoon with the manuscript on the passenger seat. I heard the house before I reached the door. The sump pump grinding under the basement floor. That wet, laboring sound. Water it could never quite win against. My mother used to laugh about it. The least of it, she'd said. She was right about that, too. Renata met me on the porch. She didn't ask me in. You can wait in your car until we're ready, she said. Then she smiled, small and pleased. Actually, come in. I want you to see this. Inside, the dining table was set like a courtroom. Papers stacked at Renata's place. Trent beside her with his arms crossed. My father in his chair by the window, not looking at me. On the top page of the nearest stack, my name was written, and struck out. Not crossed once, gouged. She'd dragged the pen through Sidney Whitmore again and again, hard enough that the paper had torn, hard enough to feel the grooves from the back of the page. She'd scratched me off every sheet in the house. I set my mother's manuscript on the table in front of me and sat down. I didn't touch her papers. Why would I? Comfortable? Renata asked. The pump ground on beneath us. Whenever you're ready, I said. That was when the doorbell rang. Renata's head turned. Who's that? Nobody moved, so I did. I opened the door. Corinne Vance stood on the porch in a gray coat, a leather folder under her arm, and beside her Hollis Brant, tall and silver and calm, holding a slim binder against his chest. Good afternoon, Corinne said, and stepped inside like she'd been invited. Behind me, the room went still. I heard Trent's chair scrape. I heard my father say something under his breath. Who invited them? Renata's voice climbed. She was on her feet now. This is a family meeting. This is our house. You have no— I'm Corinne Vance, Corinne said pleasantly, setting her folder on the table. I was your mother's attorney for 20 years. Mr. Brandt is the chief operating officer of Whitmore Table Company. I think we should all sit down. You can leave, Renata snapped. Both of you, now. Corinne didn't leave. She pulled out a chair, sat, and folded her hands on top of the folder she hadn't yet opened. Renata, she said, why don't you say what you brought us here to say? Then I'll say mine. For a heartbeat, Renata just stared at her. Then something ugly and triumphant moved across her face, and she decided she still had the upper hand, and she reached for her papers. She shoved the folder down the table at me. It slid the whole length and stopped against my mother's manuscript. Fine, I'll say it in front of your lawyer. Her voice shook with the pleasure of it. Mom signed the entire trust to me. You get nothing. My father slapped the arm of his chair. She moved in. She ran the money. You ran off to the city. I didn't touch the folder. Renata leaned across the table, hunting my face for the tears she'd come for. Go on, she said softly. Read what you lost. I looked at her. Then I looked at Corinne, who had not moved, whose folder was still closed under her folded hands. I don't need to read it, I said quietly, but I think you should hear what my mother did last winter. Corinne opened her folder. Corinne didn't raise her voice. She never does. She slid a single stapled document from the folder and set it flat where everyone could see. This is the trust as it stands today, she said. Every version, every amendment. I'll read what it holds. Renata leaned back, arms crossed, waiting to be crowned. The trust holds one asset, Corinne said. The lake house, that's all. That's the whole estate. Trent's smile flickered. Renata's didn't. Not yet. Let's value it, Corinne went on, turning a page. The appraisal came back at $740,000. She let that sit 1 second. Now the other side of the ledger. Under the floor, the sump pump caught, groaned, and started its slow grinding pull. The basement was seeping again. It always was. The cash-out refinance, Corinne said. $620,000. That funded the company's expansion and your mother's medical bills. She didn't look up. Then the home equity line. $85,000 drawn down since February. Now she looked up just once. Drawn by you, Renata. Renata's mouth opened. Back property taxes, unpaid, Corinne continued. $31,000, then closing and selling costs on top. She squared the pages against the table. Subtract it all from $740. What's left isn't a fortune, it's a shortfall. The room was very quiet, just the pump grinding. The house doesn't pay you, Corinne said. You pay the house. Renata laughed, short and wrong. That's not— those are temporary. Refinance numbers move— They move down, Corinne said gently. They've been moving down for months. I said nothing. I folded my hands. I let the first domino lie where it fell. Renata pushed up in her chair, palms flat on the table. Fine, fine. The house is leveraged. I know that. Her voice climbed. But the house was never the point. The company, the royalties, the books. Those are Mom's. Those are worth millions, and they go through the estate. They go through the trust. To me. They don't, Corinne said. They do. She owned them. She dies, they pass. I'm the beneficiary. They aren't hers to pass, Corinne said. They stopped being hers last January. The word January landed on the table like a stone. In January, Corinne said, fully lucid, with a capacity evaluation on file, your mother did two things. She assigned the cookbook royalty stream and the literary rights to the Whitmore table, outright, and she transferred her controlling stake in Whitmore Table Company, 62%, by executed, notarized transfer. She turned to the next document. Both entirely outside the trust. Neither one ever entered it. You can't inherit what the estate never held. The royalties are $310,000 a year, Hollis said, speaking for the first time. His voice was flat, factual. The controlling stake is worth roughly $3 million. The transfer is recorded on the company's books. I recorded it myself. Renata stared at him. You work for us. I work for Whitmore Table Company, Hollis said. The board chair that goes with those shares has already been filled. Lawfully, months ago. Filled by whom? Trent said. Nobody answered him. I thought of my mother's hands in that cold January kitchen, pressing the papers into mine. Mind the real things, Sidney. The ones people can't see. I'd carried the sentence for 6 months without knowing it was a deed. Filled by whom? Trent said again louder. Corinne set the last two documents down side by side and turned them toward the family. By your sister, she said, by Sidney. The room turned. Slowly. All of it. The way a boat comes about. Trent first, then Gordon, then Renata. Every face swinging to me at the head of the table where I'd been sitting quiet the whole time. Gordon found his voice. That's not possible. She was already slipping in January. She couldn't have understood what she was signing. She understood completely, Corinne said. She lifted the last page free. This is a written capacity evaluation. Dr. Priscilla Hearn, psychiatrist, examined your mother that same week in January. Her finding is unambiguous, fully oriented, fully competent, fully aware of the nature and consequences of what she was doing. She laid it down beside the transfer. So you understand what this means, Corinne said. The January transfers stand. Every argument that your mother was incompetent doesn't help you. It buries you. She slid one more sheet forward. Because here is the amendment. The one naming Renata sole beneficiary. And here's the signature on it. She set the two signatures next to each other. She didn't have to say a word. The January hand was firm. Wide loops, sure line, the same hand that had written a bestseller. The later hand beside it was thin, crooked, dragged across the page, a signature someone had steadied from behind, coaxed. The competent signature made the transfers, Corinne said quietly. The incompetent one made you a beneficiary of a house that's underwater. The amendment fails for the very reason you were about to argue. It's void. Renata looked at the two signatures. For 1 second, she couldn't speak. Corinne kept going because the arithmetic wasn't finished. Understand what your sister controls now, she said. 62% of Whitmore Table Company, the board chair, every decision the company makes. She turned to Gordon. Including the advisory position you draw $90,000 a year from, Gordon. That salary continues at the majority owner's discretion. Hers. Gordon's hand came off the table. And any distribution you two were counting on, Hollis said to Renata and Trent. Any advance, any payout against your stake in the business? There's nothing to distribute to you. You don't hold shares. You never did. There's more, Corinne said. She didn't gloat. She just kept setting things down. In June, my office filed an Adult Protective Services report. Elder financial abuse. The isolation, the changed locks, the steered attorney, the $85,000 drawn on your mother's home while she was declining. It's documented, formally. The APS finding and the void amendment tell the same story about the same 5 months. Renata came up out of her chair. This is a setup, she said, and her voice cracked all the way open. You sat there. You sat there smiling while you let me. She swung toward me, and everything she'd been holding under the smile came out at once. You did this to me. You planned this. You came in here and you humiliated. Renata, I said, quiet. Don't. Don't you dare sit there calm. I was calm. That was the whole point. She was on her feet, shaking, and I hadn't raised my voice once. Trent had stopped looking at anyone. He was staring at the table's edge, doing the math I already knew. 200,000 in exposure banked on a house that would sell at a loss. He sank an inch in his chair and stayed there. Whatever he'd pushed her to lock down had locked around his own throat. Gordon put his face in his hand. For just a moment, something moved through him that wasn't about money. An old man watching his wife get read out like a probate file, understanding at last that the woman who'd built all of this was gone and had chosen without him. His eyes were wet. I let myself feel it for exactly as long as it lasted. Then he lowered his hand and said, "You should have taken a settlement." And it passed. "You manipulated her," Renata said. "A dying woman. You got in her ear and you turned her against her own family." "I was 2 hours away," I said. "You were the one in her ear." "You ran off to the city," Gordon said, the old sentence worn smooth from use. I looked at him. "I ran off to the city and spent 10 years managing writers' rights and royalties for a living." My voice didn't rise. "That's why she trusted me with the books, not despite the city. Because of it. She handed the one thing she'd built that couldn't be mortgaged to the only person in this family who understood what it was worth." Nobody said anything. "You told me I'd get nothing," I said. I looked at Renata. "You scratched my name off every page in this house. You leaned across this table and told me to read what I'd lost." I let the pause open. "Read the ledger again, Renata. The nothing was always the house. You just spent 5 months making sure it landed on you." Her hand was still braced on the table. It was shaking. I let the room breathe. Then I sat forward, and for the first time, I opened the folder I'd carried in and never touched. "Here's what happens now," I said. "I'll say it once so no one has to guess." The manuscript was on top, cream pages, my mother's looping hand, the grease-thumbed corners of 40 years of kitchens. I set it aside gently and spoke to the papers under it. "Mom moves out of this place you put her," I said, "into real care, a good one. It's already arranged, and the royalties pay for it. Not the trust, not the house. The books she wrote pay for the rest of her life." I looked up. "That's what she meant by the real things." Hollis nodded once. "The company keeps running," I said. "People work there. Families depend on it. It doesn't get burned down to make a point. It continues, and it continues under someone who won't strip it for parts." Then I looked at each of them in turn. "And here's the part you didn't earn, but I'm offering anyway." I kept my voice level. "I'm not filing everything I could file. Not today. There's a version of this where the APS report becomes a criminal referral, where the 85,000 gets clawed back with interest, where every one of you answers for the last 5 months in a room with a docket number." I let them see I meant it. "Or there's the other version," I said. "You tell the truth about what you did. You leave Mom's care to the people who'll actually give it. You treat her from here on like the woman who built everything you tried to steal. Do that, and I let the rest go. Gordon keeps his advisory chair, at my discretion, as long as it's earned. The debts get restructured, not weaponized." I closed the folder. "That's the whole offer. It's more than you left me. Take it or don't." "You're enjoying this," Renata said, but the fight had gone thin. "No," I said, and I wasn't. I'd have given all of it back to have her hands steady again. That was the truest thing I said all afternoon, and it landed harder than any number. They left the way people leave a room they've lost. Trent went first, not looking at his wife, already on the phone in the driveway to someone about the house. Gordon rose slowly, an old man now, and paused by my chair as if there were a sentence he might finally say. There wasn't. He walked out with his hand trailing the table. Renata was last. She stopped in the doorway. "She was my mother, too," she said. "She was," I said. "You could have just loved her." She didn't have an answer for that. The screen door clapped shut behind her, and the house went quiet, except for the one sound that never stopped. Under the floor, the sump pump caught and ground and pulled, bailing out a basement that would never stay dry, draining a house they'd fought 5 months to own. I listened to it for a while. The prize, still costing money in an empty room. Corinne gathered her documents. Hollis shook my hand and said he'd see me at the board meeting. Then they were gone too, and it was just me at the long table where my name had been gouged off every page. I pulled the manuscript back in front of me. Cream pages, the looping hand, corners worn soft by 40 years of my mother's thumbs. I opened it to the first recipe she ever wrote down, the one from the diner box. And I sat there with the only thing in that house worth keeping. Mind the real things, she told me, the ones people can't see. I could see them now. Weeks passed, the kind that don't announce themselves. Mom's new place sits on a quiet street, and they built the common room around a real kitchen. Burners that work, a long farm table, the smell of bread most mornings, lavender in the window boxes. She likes to fold the towels there, over and over, her hands still sure of that one thing. The nurses call her Miss Della. She smiles every time at the word. The lake house sold in September. It went for less than the debt lashed to it, and Renata and Trent walked away owing the difference. Somewhere in that stretch, the marriage came apart. Trent moved to his brother's, and Renata stopped answering the family thread. Gordon's advisory checks still arrive. They arrive because I sign them now, and I told him plainly what continuing looks like. He visits his wife, he speaks to me with respect, or the 90,000 ends. He visits. That was all I asked. I run Whitmore Table Company the way she built it. Quietly, no name gouged off anything. The royalties from the Whitmore table cover her care, and then some. I didn't turn any of it into a monument to what they did. I made it hers. If you've ever been the one who did the real work and went unseen, the one they only noticed the day you finally stopped asking, then you already know the quietest thing you'll ever do is draw a line and keep standing on your side of it. Tell me somewhere below where you drew yours. I drive out on Sundays. Last week I brought the manuscript. The original, the Whitmore table. Cream pages gone soft as cloth. The grease-thumbed corners, her looping hand crossing out 2 cups and writing, "A little more, trust yourself." I set it in her lap. She ran one finger down the margin the way you touch a face you half remember. For a long while, nothing. Then her eyes lifted to mine, and something moved behind them. Not memory exactly, something older than memory. She patted the pages. She patted my hand. "Mind the real things, Sidney," she said, soft and certain. "The ones people can't see." I don't know if she knew it was me. I've decided it doesn't matter. Last winter, with steady hands and a clear mind, she looked at all of us and chose me. Not the loud one, not the one who moved in. Me, the daughter who was never in the room. That choice was the sentence I'd waited 32 years to hear. She saw me. She'd seen me the whole time. I sat with her until the bread came out of the oven. The people who love you rarely announce it across a table. They leave it where only you will think to look, in the quiet, unglamorous things no one else ever bothered to want. She wrote me into the margins, where the real recipe always lived.